Hi, I'm Rachel, and I'm 34 years old. I work as an elementary school teacher, but my true passion has always been baking. I learned from my grandmother when I was just 8 years old, and over the years, I have perfected recipes that have been passed down through 3 generations. What I'm about to tell you is the story of how my greatest act of love was dismissed as an embarrassment, and how sometimes the people closest to us can cut the deepest with just a few thoughtless words. You know that feeling when you pour your heart into creating something special for someone you love? When you spend hours planning, shopping for the perfect ingredients, and carefully crafting something made with your own hands? Well, I experienced the complete opposite of gratitude when I presented my sister Emma with her birthday cake this year, and she looked at my homemade creation and said, "Store-bought would have been less embarrassing." Let me tell you the whole story, because this isn't just about a cake. This is about family traditions, about love expressed through flour and sugar, and about the moment I realized that not everyone values the time and care that goes into homemade gifts. For 15 years, I had baked Emma a birthday cake. 15 years of researching new flavors, trying different decorating techniques, and spending my weekends in the kitchen creating something unique just for her. It started when we were teenagers and I was just learning to bake. Back then, my cakes were simple, maybe a little lopsided, with frosting that wasn't quite smooth enough. But Emma always acted like they were the most beautiful things she had ever seen. "Rach, this is amazing," she would say, taking photos from every angle before we even cut into it. "I can't believe you made this yourself." Those early cakes weren't perfect, but they were made with love, and Emma seemed to understand that. She would save a piece to take to work the next day, bragging to her colleagues about her sister's baking skills. She'd even ask me for the recipe sometimes, though she never actually tried to make them herself. As I got better at baking, the cakes became more elaborate. I learned how to make fondant decorations, how to create smooth buttercream finishes, how to build multi-layer masterpieces that looked like they belonged in a bakery window. Each year, I would try to outdo myself, not because Emma expected it, but because I loved seeing the joy on her face when I presented her with something beautiful that I'd created just for her. But somewhere along the way, something changed. I didn't notice it at first. It was subtle, gradual. The enthusiasm became a little less genuine, the compliments a little more forced. Emma started making comments about how much work I was putting into the cakes, how she didn't need anything so elaborate. She'd say, "You don't have to go to all this trouble." But I thought she was just being modest. I should have paid more attention to those warning signs. I should have realized that Emma was becoming someone different from the sister who used to treasure my imperfect teenage attempts at cake decorating. Looking back, I can trace the exact evolution of our birthday cake tradition and how it slowly transformed from something Emma cherished into something she merely tolerated. Years 1 through 5 were pure magic. I was still learning, still experimenting, but Emma's genuine excitement made every imperfect swirl of frosting feel like a masterpiece. I remember her 21st birthday cake, a strawberry layer cake with cream cheese frosting that had collapsed slightly on one side. Instead of being disappointed, Emma laughed and called it charmingly rustic. She posted pictures of it all over social media with captions about having the most talented sister in the world. Years 6 through 10 marked my golden period of cake making. I had mastered the basics and was moving into more complex designs. Emma's 25th birthday cake was a 3-layer chocolate masterpiece with hand-piped roses and gold leaf accents. It took me an entire weekend to complete, but when I saw the look of awe on her face, every minute felt worth it. "Rachel, this is professional level," she had said, running her finger along the perfect edge of my buttercream work. "You could open your own bakery." Those were the years when Emma would invite friends over specifically to see the cake before we cut into it. She'd tell the story of how I'd been making her birthday cake since we were teenagers, how each year was a surprise, how lucky she felt to have a sister who could create such beautiful things. But years 11 through 14, that's when I started noticing the shift. Emma had gotten a promotion at her marketing firm and was moving in different social circles. She'd started dating Marcus, a finance guy who was all about image and status. Her apartment got more expensive, her clothes got more designer, and suddenly everything in her life had to project a certain level of sophistication. The compliments about my cakes became more qualified. "It's beautiful, Ratch, but you didn't have to go to so much trouble." Or, "It's lovely, but I hope you didn't spend too much time on it. I know how busy you are with teaching." I started noticing that she'd stopped taking pictures of the cakes. She'd stopped posting about them on social media. When her friends came over for birthday dinners, the cake would appear briefly, get cut quickly, and then disappear into the kitchen while everyone moved on to other topics. But I kept making them because it was our tradition, because I loved her, because creating something beautiful with my own hands for someone I cared about felt like the most natural expression of love I knew. Last month, as Emma's 30th birthday approached, I decided to pull out all the stops. This was a milestone birthday, after all. If anything deserved a spectacular homemade cake, it was this. I spent weeks planning what would become my most ambitious creation yet. I had no idea I was also planning the end of a 15-year tradition. Emma's 30th birthday deserved something extraordinary, and I was determined to create a cake that would remind her of how special our tradition was. I spent hours researching design ideas, watching tutorial videos, and sketching different concepts until I found the perfect inspiration. I decided on a 4-layer vanilla bean cake with salted caramel filling, covered in Swiss meringue buttercream and decorated with handcrafted sugar flowers. The design was elegant and sophisticated, exactly the kind of thing that would fit into Emma's new refined aesthetic. I wanted to prove that homemade didn't mean amateur, that my skills had evolved along with her tastes. The sugar flowers alone took me 3 days to perfect. I made dozens of practice roses, peonies, and eucalyptus leaves before I achieved the realistic look I was going for. Each petal had to be individually shaped and colored, then assembled with delicate precision. By the time I was finished, I had created what looked like a small bouquet of real flowers that just happened to be completely edible. The cake layers required special attention, too. I used Madagascar vanilla beans that I'd ordered online, scraping each pod by hand to get those beautiful black specks throughout the batter. The salted caramel filling was made from scratch, cooked to the perfect consistency and temperature to create that ideal balance of sweet and salty that Emma loved. The Swiss meringue buttercream was perhaps the most challenging part. Unlike regular buttercream, this technique requires heating egg whites and sugar to a specific temperature, then whipping them while gradually adding butter until you achieve a silky, stable frosting that's perfect for smooth finishes and detailed piping work. It took me 2 attempts to get it right, but the result was flawless. I worked for 2 full days assembling and decorating the cake. Each layer had to be perfectly level, each application of filling had to be just the right thickness, and the final coating of buttercream had to be absolutely smooth. I used a bench scraper and turntable to achieve that professional finish, going over every inch until there wasn't a single imperfection visible. The final step was placing the sugar flowers. I arranged them in a cascading design that flowed from the top of the cake down one side, creating an organic, garden-inspired look that was both elegant and romantic. When I stepped back to admire the finished product, I felt a surge of pride unlike anything I had experienced before. This wasn't just a birthday cake, it was a work of art. It was museum-quality craftsmanship that rivaled anything you'd find in the most expensive bakeries in the city. The flavors were sophisticated, the design was flawless, and every single element had been created with love and attention to detail. I carefully transported it to Emma's apartment in a special cake carrier, driving more slowly than I ever had in my life to ensure that not a single sugar petal would be disturbed. I couldn't wait to see her reaction to what I knew was my masterpiece. I had no idea that my greatest achievement would become my most painful memory. Emma's 30th birthday party was being held at her apartment, the sleek, modern space she'd moved into after her latest promotion. Everything about it screamed expensive minimalism. White walls, glass furniture, abstract art that probably cost more than my monthly salary. It was the kind of place where my grandmother's vintage cake server would look completely out of place. I arrived early to help set up, carefully carrying my masterpiece in its protective carrier. Emma was rushing around, adjusting flower arrangements and making sure every surface was spotless. She looked stunning in a designer dress that I recognized from her Instagram posts, something she'd splurged on specifically for this milestone birthday. "Oh, good, you're here," she said, barely glancing at the cake carrier. "You can put that in the kitchen. Marcus is setting up the bar, and I need to finish getting ready before people arrive." I stood there for a moment, expecting her to ask to see the cake, to show some curiosity about what I'd created for her special day. But she was already moving on to other tasks, adjusting place settings and checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. In the kitchen, I carefully removed the cake from its carrier and placed it on the marble countertop. Even in Emma's sterile, modern kitchen, it looked absolutely stunning. The sugar flowers caught the light from the pendant lamps, and the smooth buttercream surface was flawless. I took a moment to appreciate what I had accomplished before covering it with the glass dome Emma used for displaying pastries. As guests began arriving, I noticed the caliber of people Emma was socializing with these days. Everyone looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine, perfectly styled, wearing clothes with recognizable designer labels, discussing vacation homes and wine tastings and art gallery openings. These weren't the college friends or coworkers I remembered from previous birthday parties. This was Emma's new crowd, and I felt increasingly out of place in my simple dress and cardigan. Marcus was holding court by the bar, mixing craft cocktails and telling stories about his latest business deals. He acknowledged me with a polite nod, but didn't engage in conversation. I'd always gotten the impression that he saw me as Emma's quirky sister who still lived in a small apartment and worked a normal job. Throughout the evening, I kept glancing toward the kitchen, waiting for the moment when Emma would unveil the cake. I imagined the guests' reactions when they saw what I'd created. Surely even this sophisticated crowd would be impressed by the artistry and skill involved. But as the night progressed, I started to notice something troubling. Emma seemed almost nervous about something. She kept checking her phone, whispering with Marcus, and glancing toward the kitchen with an expression I couldn't quite read. When it finally came time for dessert, Emma's behavior became even stranger. Instead of the excitement I was used to seeing, she seemed reluctant, almost dreading the moment when she'd have to present my creation to her guests. That should have been my first warning that something was very, very wrong. When Emma finally announced it was time for cake, I felt a familiar flutter of excitement mixed with nerves. This was always my favorite moment, the reveal, the gasps of admiration, the photos, the celebration of something I'd created with love. I followed Emma into the kitchen, expecting her to ask me to help present the cake. Instead, she stood in front of the counter with her back to me, staring at my creation under the glass dome. Her shoulders were tense, and she was taking deep breaths like she was preparing for something difficult. "Emma," I said softly, "should we bring it out? Everyone's waiting." She turned around, and for a moment I saw something in her eyes that made my stomach drop. It wasn't joy or excitement or even polite appreciation. It was embarrassment. She was embarrassed by my cake. "Rachel," she said, her voice strained, "we need to talk." But before I could respond, Marcus appeared in the doorway. "Everything okay in here? People are asking about the birthday cake." Emma looked between us, and I could see her making some kind of internal calculation. Then she lifted the glass dome, revealing my masterpiece to Marcus for the first time. His reaction was immediate and brutal. He let out a small laugh, not the delighted kind, but the awkward kind you make when you're trying not to show how uncomfortable you are. "Oh, wow," he said, and I could hear him struggling to find the right words. "That's very homemade looking." Homemade looking? As if that was somehow a bad thing. As if the hours of work, the professional techniques, the expensive ingredients, and the artistry I'd poured into every detail somehow counted for nothing because it hadn't come from a fancy bakery with a recognizable name. But Emma's reaction was what truly shattered me. Instead of defending my work, instead of pointing out the skill and care that had gone into creating something beautiful for her special day, she looked at Marcus and said the words that would echo in my mind for weeks afterward. "I know, store-bought would have been less embarrassing." The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of my heart breaking. I stood there, staring at my sister, the person I'd been creating birthday cakes for since we were teenagers, the person who used to brag about my baking to anyone who would listen, as she dismissed 15 years of tradition and love as embarrassing. I mean, Emma continued, looking at Marcus for validation, "it's sweet that she tries, but when you're having people over like this," she gestured vaguely toward the living room where her sophisticated guests were waiting, "it just doesn't really fit the aesthetic, you know?" The aesthetic. My love, my time, my skill, my art, reduced to an aesthetic problem. Marcus nodded knowingly. "Yeah, there's this amazing French bakery downtown. Their cakes are incredible, really elegant, professional. Maybe next time." Next time. As if there would be a next time after this. I stood in that sterile kitchen, staring at my beautiful cake. The cake I'd spent days perfecting. The cake that represented 15 years of love and tradition. And felt something inside me break apart and then crystallize into something harder. "You're right," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. "This doesn't fit your aesthetic at all." Emma looked relieved, as if she thought I was agreeing with her assessment, but I wasn't done. "It's too genuine, too personal, too full of actual love and care." I carefully placed the glass dome back over my cake. "Your friends probably wouldn't understand what it means to spend 3 days handcrafting sugar flowers, or why someone would use Madagascar vanilla beans instead of artificial flavoring. They're used to paying premium prices for someone else's work, not appreciating the value of something made with love." Emma's face flushed. "Rachel, that's not what I meant." "Yes, it is. And you know what? You're absolutely right. This cake deserves better than being served to people who see homemade as a synonym for amateur." I carefully transferred my masterpiece back into its protective carrier. Marcus and Emma watched in stunned silence as I gathered my things. "What are you doing?" Emma asked. "I'm taking this to people who will appreciate it. My students have been asking me to bring in cake all semester. They'll think it's the most beautiful thing they've ever seen, because they still understand that something made with love is worth more than something bought with money." And that's exactly what I did. The next morning, I brought the cake to school. My third graders' faces lit up like Christmas morning when they saw it. They gasped at the sugar flowers, marveled at the smooth frosting, and asked me 100 questions about how I'd made each element. "Miss Rachel, you made this yourself?" Sophia asked, my shyest student. "It looks like it came from a fairy tale." That's when I realized something important. Emma was wrong. My cake wasn't embarrassing. It was extraordinary. The problem wasn't my baking. It was that Emma had forgotten how to appreciate genuine gestures of love. Emma called me later that week, wanting to talk things through. She said I'd overreacted, that she'd just been nervous about impressing Marcus's friends, that she hadn't meant to hurt my feelings. But I was done making excuses for people who didn't value what I had to offer. Emma, for 15 years, I've been showing you love the only way I knew how. If that embarrasses you now, then we want different things from our relationship. I haven't made Emma a birthday cake since then. Her 31st birthday came and went with a store-bought creation from that French bakery Marcus recommended. She posted a picture of it on Instagram, perfectly elegant, completely impersonal, and utterly forgettable. Meanwhile, I've started teaching weekend baking classes for adults who want to learn the lost art of creating something beautiful with their own hands. My students understand that homemade isn't amateur, it's authentic. And authenticity, I've learned, is something you can't buy at any price. Do you enjoy stories with emotion and twists? Then like, subscribe, and activate the bell. Here, every word touches you.